I was unfortunately born to very broke parents, and we lived in a kind of big house for the first couple years of my life, and then that was not actually doable. Like, could not handle the bills, and we ended up living in a garage that my father tried to convert into being kind of house-like. And we lived in the garage for several years and stuff until my father moved us to a different state, trying to get better work, and we lived in a teeny tiny trailer, and eventually he started doing better at work, so we moved out of that trailer into like a really nice double wide trailer that was almost like a house. Like, it was in an area that felt suburban, and there were houses and other really nice trailers and stuff, and everybody had like their own little space and yard. So it's the closest thing to like suburbia or whatever that I lived in when I was a small child. But they couldn't afford it. They went over on the bills, they went bankrupt. We ended up back in that garage. When we were living back in the garage, some bad stuff happened, and so we ended up living in the ghetto. Like, the ghetto. Like, you just go outside playing in the hedges with the other little children and gunshots in the background. Like, really not safe. It was miserable. It was a little brown apartment. Like, the walls were brown, and the floor, the carpet was brown. Like, our furniture was brown. Everything was brown. The kitchen appliances and like the kitchen counters and the cabinets, everything was brown. Like, everything. I don't know why brown was the color of choice for, I guess because it was cheap. And after that, we lived in a little trailer again, with my birth mother, and then, you know, my father, he did the best he could. Sometimes he would rent a house, sometimes he'd rent apartments, sometimes he lived in a barn. It was not that easy. Eventually we did live in a house with my birth mother, and then eventually my dad remarried and things settled down for him, and he got a house too. So eventually, once I was in my late teens-ish, there was housing that was more stable. But it was still unstable because part of the time I lived in one and part of the time I lived in another. As soon as I turned 18, I was living on couches. I had nowhere to go, and I just was trying to get my act together and stuff, so it took a little while before I got a place. But once I did get a place, I lived there for 10 years. I rented a duplex, and then I had to leave that, and I lost almost everything I owned. Like, everything. I could have fit in the backseat of my car, everything I owned. Like, it was not much. Yeah, that sucked. And then I lived in a slumlord just one room, and it was terrible. It was horrible. Like, there were rules about when you were allowed to use the bathroom or what times you were allowed to go to the kitchen. Like, it was, oh, they didn't pay the electric bill on time, so I guess none of us have electricity now. Like, it was really bad. Bugs, pee smells, like, it was not good. Nails sticking out of the walls and would snag on you because the door didn't shut all the way. Like, yeah. I got into a apartment, and for a little bit I lived in that apartment. It was just a studio apartment, but I was super grateful for it, and then managed to, you know, get out of that and get out here where I'm living now. And I have had to do things going through all these housing situations that, you know, are just about like surviving, just about this is what you have to do to get through kind of a thing. And so I want to talk today a little bit about, from my own personal experience, some things that can be done to help with housing expenses, because right now the number one expense for Americans, like across the board, even when they have like six-figure incomes, is still housing. And housing is just massive. It's a huge inflated expense, and so I've had to figure out ways in my own life to be able to afford housing, because that's one of the things we need as humans. We need shelter. We need somewhere to exist. We need somewhere to sleep without rain coming on us and snow coming on us, and, you know, feeling like everything we own is about to be stolen. I have definitely felt like that in my life. So some things that can be done. The number one thing that I would suggest from my own personal experience is don't live alone. And that sucks for me because I'm an introvert. I don't actually like spending a lot of time being like super social and like, hey, I like if I go to a party, I'm usually like found like in a, you know, corner. I go talk to everyone and make sure everyone feels like, you know, I friendly toward them and, you know, try to be polite like that. And then I just go and like, okay, I'm kind of done. I don't have the largest capacity for a ton of social gatheringness. So having to have roommates or having to live with somebody else is a hard thing. It's thankfully never gotten to the point where I moved back in with my parents. Every other one of my siblings has at some point had to go back as an adult and live with my parents, and I have not. I am extremely proud of that because that is a hard thing to accomplish, especially when you grow up as poor as we did. Living with someone else cuts the costs for your rent. It does raise utilities, but because you're splitting the utilities, or maybe one person pays one utility and another one pays another, it still ends up also bringing that down as well. But rent, even if you're not doing halfsies, like for instance, right now, my current roommate, we are not doing halfsies. We have a contract written up between the two of us that's different than the lease agreement. All under the lease agreement, like my name is on the lease, but in actuality, we have a separate contract for what happens with the lease. Extremely important. Even if it's like someone who's your friend, write up a contract. You don't even have to print it out. Just make it on Google Drive, go to Google Docs, write up a contract. If you're not sure how to, like if you just search on a search engine, hey, here's, I'm looking for standard rental contract, the state that I'm in. There's usually like a template or an example of one, and you can just copy and paste a lot of it, and then insert different dates or insert different names, insert, you know, what changes you need to. The other thing is try to get receipts for rent that you pay. Yeah, so the first thing, have someone that you live with. If you can live with your parents and it's not like a pride factor for you, if you can swallow your pride, it could be nice because your parents usually don't charge you much for rent, if rent. My parents are not wealthy enough to not charge rent, but they charge a heck of a lot less than rent anywhere else would be. My second thing is have rechargeable stuff, and even I've looked into solar like banks where you can charge stuff up and use the solar for your electricity for like charging your stuff to bring your bill down. That might sound weird, that might sound strange, but like it is a massive difference in electricity. And so anything that's like something that I can do to lower my electric bill, I do it. Like, I don't use lights unless I happen to be in that room and it's dark enough that I need to use the light. And once I'm done, I turn the light off. This is good for the planet as well, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because, yes, I want to do things that are good for the planet. I'm not trying to say don't do things that are good for the planet. I'm saying also do things that are good for your wallet. And if you can unplug stuff, or if you can keep stuff turned off, like, I've been to so many people's house where they just leave the TV on. Like, they're not even in the room, but the TV is just on. And I'm like, why is this happening? Or like weird things turned on. Like they have night lights that are just plugged in all the time and they're just on even during the daytime. And I'm like, why is this happening? Like those things suck up little bits of electricity from you. And, you know, you think, oh, hey, I am walking in to the kitchen and the microwave says what time it is. Well, do you really need it to say what time it is when your phone is in your pocket and it tells you what time it is, and the microwave is just sitting there with the clock showing that time all day, even when you're at work? Like, just little bits of electricity. All of the little red lights on things and the little, you know, timers on things, all of those little tiny nuggets of electricity statistically, they did a study. It was a while ago the last time I read this, so it could have changed by now, because a lot of things are a lot more energy efficient than I feel like it was 5 years ago. But the point is it was equal to as much in a month. All those little nuggets of electricity was equal to a year of running your refrigerator. How much electricity it uses. So you can save yourself on your electric bill. If you've got natural gas or something like that, same thing. Try not to have things going all the time. When I had natural gas in my house that I my duplex, I call it my house, but it was a duplex, that I lived in for a decade, I had a natural gas heater, and I flat out would undo the pilot light for half the year. Like, not even have it on. Not even have the capability of using it. So then my natural gas bill was essentially $8 a month. Now, I did it that way instead of just outright canceling it half the year, because if I canceled it, leaving it hooked up but not using it was $8 a month. Canceling it would have equated to $12 a month. So I actually saved $4 a month by doing it that way instead of just cutting it off. So you can do the math for yourself and see which one is better, but there are ways to penny pinch, as it were, in your energy usage. Another thing is with water, make sure you don't have any running toilets or leaky faucets or anything that's like that, because that is a big sink. If you, during the winter, can just, instead of having only your curtain there, put a blanket over the outside of it, it will reduce your heating bill significantly. It's little things like that that can make a really big difference with your energy costs. And maybe you can't change what your rent is, but if you can change what your utilities are, it can help with the housing costs overall. The landlord gets to decide how much the rent is. You can make some decisions about what your energy bill is. A thing I am doing right now to help reduce my housing is cleaning. I have had a deal with every roommate that I've had so far where they don't like to do chores, household chores. And so the deal is like written up, it's explained, it's thoroughly done, but it's essentially I get a discount on rent because I do all the chores in the common living spaces as well as my own personal space. Now, I don't clean their room. I ain't their mom. I ain't gonna go in there and fold their laundry, and put it away for them. But when I do the laundry, I do fold the laundry and say, hey, your laundry's folded, you can go put it away. I make very clear when I do this what they're gonna get. So I say, you don't have to ever clean a toilet again while you live with me. You don't have to worry about doing the dishes. If you cook something, I will still do the dishes for the thing you cooked. If you hate vacuuming, you hate sweeping, you hate mopping, you hate dusting, congratulations, I'm a great roommate. You don't like doing laundry? I will do the laundry. And, these things add up. My current roommate has 3 cats. 3. I feed those cats twice a day. Now, it don't take that long. It's like a 6-minute task. And it saves me a lot of money every month on rent. So if you have a roommate and you can talk to them about things they hate to do and present it that way, if it's something that you don't hate doing, I save a lot of money on rent in this. And the thing is you can look up like the average pay for, like, say, a come-in like cleaning service or a maid service or something, and you can say, look, here's how much this costs, here's half of how much this costs. Let's make it super simple numbers. Say they make $1,000 a month. I would say, hey, can I have like $400 or $500 off of rent? I will do it all month. You don't even have to ask me. I will preemptively do it. I will make sure that I'm on top of stuff. And like each day I try to clean up clutter a little bit, gotta do dishes every day. That's just a given. You know, so like say maybe half an hour of my day spent to doing like ittle piddle chores and stuff. And then on the weekend at some point, on whatever day I can, I do like 2-3 hours worth of like making sure everything's cleaned once a week. Like, you know, the bathrooms, vacuuming, all that stuff. So in actuality, it's not like you're working a constant 9 to 5, but it still feels good to the roommate. The roommate is like, oh yeah, I don't have to do chores. I can relax. I can come home from work and chillax. I don't have to stress about all these little things. You know, they might be like trying to start a side business or trying to get into a certain career where they have to work lots of extra hours and stuff, and it stresses them out. And you can be a giant stress relief. And part of what they're doing by charging you less rent is taking stress off their load. And so yeah, that's just something I do, period. If I am living with another person, if I'm not living by myself, I do the chores, and doing the chores reduces my rent. And you can say, well, you're not working 9 to 5 every day doing the chores, so is that scammy? And I'm like, well, that's A, why you charge half instead of full, and B, I'm on retainer. Like, if they spill something all over, I'm still cleaning it up. If something emergent happens, oh, they're having a party and they need me to clean extra that day, whatever, I do it. Like, I'm on retainer. I'm on call to do the household chores as well. You know, maybe one of the cats gets sick and starts puking. I'm cleaning it up. So it's like convenience factor. So I don't feel scammy about it at all. I feel like I give a good value. I try to do a good job. I try to keep things actually presentable and hygienic. You know, I don't just like half-ass clean. I actually clean. So there's that too. So it helps reduce my housing cost because I'm doing a little extra side work. It's basically like having a side hustle, but it's in your own home. I guess you can think of it that way, but it's really just to reduce rent, to reduce the cost. Another thing that I do currently and that I have done is help with food costs. If I can say, hey, I'm contributing this much toward food for someone else, and instead it's not going toward rent, that helps me, because I don't do it by, hey, I'll give you $200 for food. I say, hey, I'll go buy groceries this many times. And I am good enough at nitpicking and budgeting with grocery shopping that I can save. So for instance, the way I contribute toward food is basically $300 off, right? But in actuality, I spend about $230 to $250 on the actual food. I buy stuff on sale or discounts, or I get a bunch of them at a time when they're on sale to buy like in bulk and stuff like that. Obviously coupons and stuff like that can help, but basically I say, hey, I'm gonna go grocery shopping, you want me to get you food, you know, every month, can I have this much off rent? And then I do that and I feed the person, but I'm saving $50 to $70 on my rent a month because I'm doing it that way, and I'm getting them still food they want to eat, but I am basically, even if I include, say, like the gas money to drive to the store, our store is super close, so you know, I can go grocery shopping and it's not like, oh hey, I spent a bunch on gasoline. And it saves them the, again, inconvenience. The roommate I have right now does not like stressful, inconvenient things. So it saves them the frustration or the inconvenience of going grocery shopping, and it also like gives them food. So basically, the amount that is the difference between how much I'm spending and how much I'm getting off in rent would be the like Instacart fee, or however you want to think of it, like that, where I'm going and I'm being their personal shopper, kind of a thing. They just make a list, send it to me on Discord. I go shopping. Like, so it's a little more of my time, but it's time that I have available to give, whereas I don't have the money to give. So it makes it easier. You just sort of figure out, how can I make, you know, someone else's that I'm living with life easier, and them attribute value to that. If you can, try to live with someone who earns more than you. And I guess that I should have, you know, said this with the roommate thing, but it's kind of its own thing, because I have had roommates before where I lived with someone and basically they were on SSI. They had no ability to be flexible with budgeting and stuff because they were on such a tight budget, you know, and both of us were living on less than $1,000 a month, like, for our income. So it was pretty hard. But when you live with someone who earns more than you, they are excited just because rent's cheaper. If it costs less for them than what it would have cost for them to live on their own, then they're already excited. They're already happy. But number two is, as long as you're not inconvenient, they can be really, really nice. It can be super nice because not only do they just have this happiness that, hey, they have less to pay for rent than they would have had before, but also they're sometimes like, hey, I was at the grocery store and I, you know, saw these cute little cakes and I got you one. Or, hey, you know, I was just out at this place, I just traveled here and I brought you back this. You know, it can be nice. The other thing is, sometimes, you know, you're like, man, things are not going that great this month. I'm really sorry. I'm gonna have to double this next month because I can't afford it this month. They're a lot more able to be gracious about it. As long as you actually follow through, do not ever promise someone that you're gonna pay them later and not follow through. Always follow through, always. But as long as you're following through, then they can be like, yeah, you know what? Sure. You know, that's not a big deal. Oh, man, you couldn't afford to pay your half of, you know, this bill and it's like, you know, $40. Don't worry about it. Give me 80 next month. Not a big deal. And you can, like, give yourself a little time to catch up, and the other person is not, like, being impacted in a really negative way. Like, they're not being harmed by you needing to do that. Now, don't do it all the time. Don't do it every single month. And do follow through. Always follow through. Keep your relationship with the person you're living with financially on super stable levels. I see that a lot of times with people who move in with, like, their friend or, like, their sibling. They think because it's their friend or their sibling, like, everything can be really lackadaisical. And maybe to a certain degree, like, you can joke around with each other and stuff like that. That's fun. That's great. But financially, keep things really stable. Keep things really, really following the math. When it comes to your finances, no matter who you're living with, you want to keep that financial strife out of your relationship. You want to retain that friendship. Make sure that financially everything is going to be really, really on paper, and the math adds up, and good to go. If you look at being able to be with someone who earns more than you, the reason I say that is I had something catastrophic happen to me. Or at least it was for me. I had essentially someone abandon me right while I was in recovery from a surgery. And they were supposed to help me, and they were supposed to be there for me, and they didn't just abandon me, they cut off all money. They took everything that they wanted to take, and I'm trying to recover from a surgery. Like, I'm not okay. And I was with the three of us all lived together, and the other roommate, the third one, earned significantly more than the other two of us had earned. As soon as it happened, as soon as they saw what the other person did, because the other person abandoned them too. They outright abandoned the lease. Like, it was really, really bad. And they were like, really, like, this is not okay. I can't believe they did that to you. This person was supposed to love you. And they were supposed to be my best friend, you know, and they were like, this is not okay. So they just flat out said, what they actually said, technically, was I didn't owe rent for the next 6 months, but I couldn't live with that. I felt like that would be like mooching off of them. Like, I felt like it was already bad enough that the other person was bailing on their part of the lease. And, you know, here my current roommate is just gonna take that hit. Like, that's not okay. That's not fair. So I felt like that wasn't okay. So I said, I can't afford to pay all of it. You know, I can't. I'm literally recovering from surgery. Like, I am bedridden, but I have enough saved up. I can pay half. And they said, are you sure? And I said, yes. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I took advantage of you like that, especially after we both just got so taken advantage of. And so they were like, okay. And they were like, if, you know, things, you know, can recover by then, that's awesome. But if you need like a month or two when you get to that point, let me know. And thankfully, I was able to recover and get through that really horrible hard time. It was really hard to be so physically exhausted from recovering from surgery, and then also emotionally exhausted from the loss of someone I thought I could trust and that I thought loved me, thought actually cared about me, to just outright abandoning me like that, like closed off all contact, like everything, like just decided they wanted a different life. They found Jesus, basically, and decided that they couldn't be living with someone, they couldn't love someone who it was horrible. It was really, really horrible. So they just changed their whole life, like, basically overnight. And I personally don't think Jesus would have left somebody when they were recovering from surgery, but that's just me. The point is, it happened. It was a thing that happened, and I got through it. I made it through it because I had already gotten a roommate who made significantly more than me, and it was not going to be a financially egregious blow to them to halve my rent for 6 months while I recovered from surgery and recovered from the blow of having lost this very important relationship. And thank goodness for that. Like, it was a lifesaver. I would have been homeless. I would have been on the streets if I did not have that roommate at that particular time. I would have been homeless. Like, I would have had to go try to be on someone's couch while trying to recover from surgery. Like, like, I have stitches healing on my body, and I'm trying to heal. And, you know, just trying to survive that. So, having a roommate who earns more than you can really, really help. Now, obviously, not everyone can do this because I don't think there's enough people who earn more versus people who earn less for them to all unite together into, like, units like that. And not everyone who earns more likes convenience the way that some do. But it is more common amongst people who can afford convenience to like convenience. People who can afford to save time often like to save time. So if you can have that kind of relationship with them and stay honest, stay real with them, most of the time they're very open to that. They're very interested in that. Because as long as you're saving them money that they would have been spending anyway, if you can't save them as much every single month, it's not that big of a deal, as long as it still is them saving something more than they would have spent. There's a goal of mine to get a tiny house at some point. Tiny house is like not something I've done, but it's something that I've looked into for years. I'm honestly considering just building my own tiny house, but it's just ridiculously expensive to get a house. And it can be annoying with tiny houses because most tiny houses are not eligible for like a mortgage, you know, and so the interest rates on personal loans are higher than they would be for a mortgage. And like first time home buyers, you know, they can get access to some really good government grants and help that you just can't get access to when you're doing the tiny house thing. You know, it's kind of like buying land. It's not the same loans. So there is that, but you know, spending a tiny house can be anywhere from like 20,000 to 150,000 ish, you know, reasonably, and that's all still way under an actual house. And in the state I'm in, it can be up to 400 square feet and still be considered a tiny house that is, you know, not gotta have all of the same regulations and zoning and stuff as an actual house, which is massive. Like, it doesn't have to be built to exactly the same codes and standards. It does still have to be, you know, not a condemnable building that's gonna fall over or anything, and it has to have, you know, even if it's got wheels, it has to have the ability to be put on a foundation of some kind. You know, there's certain rules, but it's a lot less rules and it's a lot less expense. Instead of spending $500,000 to $700,000 on a house in my area, that's like what houses cost. Like the cheap ones, like the little ones. Unfortunately, I live in a very high cost of living area, but like a tiny house, the average, I've looked at parking spots and stuff, it's anywhere from $200 to $800 a month that people pay to rent a spot to park their tiny house. So the rent cost on it, plus the cost of the asset in the first place, is just like, because having shelter is an asset. Like, it's a money sink, but it's also an asset because you have somewhere to live. And yeah, I've looked into it a lot. There's also trailers, there's prefab homes, you know, those model homes and stuff, the unfoldable ones, printed homes. Like, there's a lot of options. You could just have a house made out of like clay-covered hay bales or like sandbags and stuff like that, adobe houses. Lot of options. It's not like just get a little tiny house on a trailer is the only option. It's just something that I've looked into a lot. So in my future, I may have experience with that, but at the moment I don't have experience with it. I just have looked into it and read a lot about it for like 4 years. 5 years maybe. I don't know. It's something to that effect. And it's like a goal. I guess the one last nugget I'll put in there is be a good tenant. Be a good roommate. I have a perfect rental history. I've gotten every security deposit back because I clean and I keep things to a certain quality level. And it's not like a museum or anything like that, but I am a little bit of a minimalist and I tend to live with hoarders. So to them, it's like amazingly clean. And if you're a good tenant, I have such a good rental history that, and I have such good credit that even when I don't earn a lot, I can still get into places. And I have such a fantastic history with all of my previous roommates that I have like referencing for getting new roommates. So like, be a really good tenant. Be really honest and be consistent and try to pay your bills early as much as you can. I literally, in one place, I just couldn't afford the rent there anymore. I just really couldn't. So I started looking at another place. Well, when I looked at the other place, they asked my current landlords about me as a tenant. And immediately, my landlord people were like, hey, are you looking at going somewhere else? And I was like, it's literally a money thing. I actually really like it here, but I cannot afford it. And they said, whatever they are offering you, we will price match it. You are a good tenant. You pay your rent early every single time. We've never had a single complaint about you or from you about anything. You know, you don't create drama. You don't have parties. You don't, nothing. So whatever they're saying they'll charge you for rent, we will match it. Stay here. And they did. they gave me a whole New Year's lease with the exact same rent as the place I had been looking at. And being a good tenant saved me hundreds of dollars a month that year. Like, just being a good tenant. Being a tenant that they didn't want to lose. So, yeah, I would say that absolutely is an important thing. Be a quality person to live with. So, housing. There's basically, unfortunately, with the way that housing is and the costs of housing overall, if you can somehow manage to get into non-market housing, congratulations. That's amazing. Non-market housing, awesome. But unfortunately, there's not very much non-market housing in the United States of America. It's just not common. If you can happen to get into HUD housing and actually get through the giant years-long wait list and then actually get someone to accept your voucher, congratulations. That's amazing, but that's also really hard to do. And it's not actual housing security because it's not like you can just stay there for forever. Eventually, you're gonna get booted. So, you do what you can to get your housing down as much as you can. There are programs, there are things to try to help some, but in reality, housing is a hard thing, and there are a lot of people living in their vehicles right now because housing is just completely unaffordable. It's just across the whole country. I've said the statistics in another video, but basically, there is literally not a single place with any kind of minimum wage, even for like the state, that you can have a 2-bedroom apartment. You can't afford it. There are only 22 counties in the entire United States where the state's minimum wage lets you live in a 1-bedroom apartment. The federal minimum wage, you just can't. It's a studio or less. Like, you cannot afford it. It's a real pity. Like, it's really, really sad. But housing is a necessity. It is something you need to survive. And I hope any of this helps someone else with, like, your housing situation, because these are all things, except for, again, the tiny house. These are all things that I have literally done to help myself with my housing. But housing can be made cheaper. Housing does not have to be what on paper it is. Like, on paper it says it's this much, but in actuality you can finagle ways to not actually have to pay that dollar amount depending on your situation. I hope this helps.